Friends, I launched the journal Samyukta in the year 2001. It was launched with a group of friends in the academic field. It was an act of defiance on our part, of defiance and self-assertion, of telling others that feminist publishing is feminist activism, that as long as you are convinced about the rightness of what you are trying to do, there is no going back. Actually, the word right carries many connotations. It can be seen in the context of right and wrong, what is right and what is wrong, as oppositional terms. Here, right becomes the constitutive other of wrong. It can be subjective too, very, very subjective. What is right to me can appear wrong to you. Another way to extend the idea of right is to the platform of rights. Etymologically, they have the same roots. Still, right carries a moral or ethical undertone. It is this tonality that gives us an edge. Or, to put it in a slightly different way, in other contexts, rights gain a political weight when you're talking about it as a platform of rights. It gains a kind of a political weight that has impelled generations to hold their head up, to put up a fight without ever giving up, even when there is no end in view. Like the endless fight that feminists have put up across the world to attain gender parity, which this day, the International Women's Day, is celebrating. Well, to come back to where I began, the publication of Samyukta as a journal of women's studies, yes, that is how we began. We kind of changed our title to a journal of gender and culture only in the year 2016, largely to keep with the changing scenario in the academic field. Well, the publication of Samyukta in the year 2001 was the culmination of a dream that I had shared with my friends from the Kerala University Women's Forum in the year 1998, when I brought out a 12-page, very thin newsletter. I have the newsletter here. This is it. The newsletter that was brought out in the year 1998. Let me quote from the editorial that I wrote in this number. I quote, "One factor that motivated our coming together was a shared belief that we must move beyond the four walls of the university. All of us were university faculty, and therefore I was firm in my conviction that we should not limit ourselves to the four walls of the university. We were convinced that in the emerging knowledge-based world order, we have a signal role to play in communicating what we have learned through years of teaching and research to the world outside. The publication of this newsletter was a step in that direction. And I continue to quote, "It is our hope that this newsletter will evolve into a journal of women's studies." Well, that is not to be. In spite of my prophetic tone, it is not to be. This is clearly not an occasion to narrate that personal story. I've written about it in detail in the book Women's Studies Narratives, Travails and Triumphs, which was edited by Professor Rekha Pandey. The title of my essay in that collection of essays is "When We Dare to Publish the Experiences of an Editor." All this happened in the second half of the 1990s, and at the beginning of the present century, Samyukta was officially launched. As I mentioned right at the beginning, Samyukta was officially launched in the year 2001 in January. What is clearly a personal narrative has interesting parallels with the history of women's movement in India. In the 1990s, debates on globalization had monopolized the feminist agenda, whether to globalize or not to globalize, that there is no alternative to globalization. These were the arguments that were being forwarded. The urgent need to forge organizational models that are flexible and at the same time would stand the test of time was deeply felt by the academics. In the early years of the present century, interest shifted to issues of secularism and citizenship. This was in the context of fundamentalist forces, particularly those in the religious front, moving center stage. Feminists continue to engage with globalization, but the focus has moved from economic issues to communication technologies, culture, and the challenges before the civil society. My experiences as an editor also reflect these links between publishing and social change. In recent years, feminist publishing or publishing for social change has come to be recognized as a developmental activity in every sense of the word. It is recognized that it requires long-term investment, often initiating research or writing on subjects that have been ignored or discounted in the academia, working closely over long periods of time with authors, and not the least, developing a readership receptive to ideas of gender equality. This calls for networking and a dogged perseverance that commercial publishing is unable to or is perhaps unwilling to invest in. Let me bring your attention to the fact that many of us in publishing still find difficult to come to terms with Amazon closing Westland Books and its 4 imprints. Obviously, there could be financial reasons behind this. If you don't make profit, you are not there. This is the logic of the capitalist economy. Yes, so there could be financial reasons behind this move, but I believe that the truth lies elsewhere. Again, let me resort to a fairly long quote. I quote, "The most terrifying truth about a mob is not that we can't understand how they operate, but that we can. What makes a man stand by and watch violence being done to another? What makes a man stand by and watch violence, brutal violence being done to another? What does a woman do after her husband has killed a pregnant stranger? What latent tensions and complexes did the instigators of violence draw upon to unleash the carnage of 28th February 2002? Revati Lal's unforgettable narrative, The Anatomy of Hate, built on a decade's worth of research and interviews, is the very first account of the perpetrators of 2002, and I should say a crucial new addition to the literature on violence. Is it not the publication of books like Revati Lal's that brought the guillotine down? I really don't know. Of course, Amazon is not giving any reasons. Westland is a homegrown publishing house that has been built and has grown over the last 6 decades of independent India. It reflects, as a publishing house, the aspirations of those who lived and matured in India after independence. If this can happen to Westland, what would not happen to small-time publishers like us? If I may add one more book, let me mention Midnight's Borders, A People's History of Modern India, again published by Westland. The author, Suchitra Vijayan, undertook a 9,000-mile journey over 7 years through India's borderlands to write Midnight's Borders. Remember, not Midnight's Children, a 1981 novel that portrays India's transition from colonial rule to independence, and of course the partition of India. The India of 2022 is definitely not the India of 1981. More than 40 years have passed. Times have changed. The demands of the times have changed. If we, by we I mean small presses like ours, Samyukta India Press, that survive on sheer imagination and grit, if we do not rise to the occasion and respond to the inevitable that awaits all of us in the face of economic power or political power, believe me, both are the same, economic power and political power. They are two sides of the same coin. If we do not respond to the inevitable, there would be no space left in this country to breathe words. And to me, words are the cornerstones of democracy. Let me repeat, words are the cornerstones of democracy anywhere in the world. For words to be heard, for space to print, publish and read, we need what I would call people power. People power in the place of money power. It is a fast diminishing, fast disappearing space, and it is exactly the precarious nature of this independent space that prompted those of us at Samyukta to collect and republish papers that came out in the journal since 2001 and place it in the political domain, to place it in the public domain, to place it for rereading. The essays, collected thematically in 3 volumes under the rubric Development, Health and Culture, summarize the feminist thought of the years since the turn of the century, the years when, instead of debating on the pros and cons of globalization and taking it to the streets, we kind of settled down to the comfort of a drawing room and started watching violence on the television screens, sipping Coca-Cola. I do not want to elaborate on the contents of this 3-volume reader. I believe that those of you who follow me, Professor Vibhuti Patel, Professor Lakshmi Lingam and Professor Samyukta Das Gupta, stalwarts in the academic field who have been with Samyukta since its inception, will elaborate and do justice to it. Ms. Mini Sukumar, General Secretary of the Indian Association for Women's Studies, the primary forum in our country for strengthening women's studies perspectives and forging women's equality, will, I hope, place a collection of essays like this in the historical context. Mini is an old friend, a leading light in the field of women's struggles, and we could not think of a better person to officially launch the books. My duty, I believe, is to hint at the historical context of the late 90s, when a collective of women academics in the University of Kerala came out to publish a journal of women's studies, Samyukta, that has managed to weather troubled times and has now graduated to publishing books under the imprint Samyukta India Press. Samyukta, which literally means coming together, has a mandate. We continue to uphold that mandate and further it. Fortunately, the next generation of scholars have come forward to enlarge and broaden our vision and give it new directions. We have traversed the distance of 22 years. There is no going back from where we have reached. The future is ours. Thank you.